All right, let's go back to the betrayal today by the Prime Minister on the issue of those tax cuts. I want to play you something the Prime Minister said just a couple of days ago. Have a listen.
I can confirm that we haven't changed our position.
We have no change to our plans. Tax cuts will happen in July.
That was last week. Joining me now, Shadow Immigration and Citizenship Minister Dan Tehan. Well, Dan, I mean, there's broken promises and then there's almighty efforts like we've seen 100 times, he said on camera. My word is my bond. Phrases I think that'll haunt Anthony Albanese to his political grave. How do you think he's going to be judged after the speech today and this attempt to frame the broken promise as a necessity?
Well, it's a sad day for our nation, and I think the Australian people will see it for what it is, that they've been lied to over a number of years now. And the Prime Minister, the thing about it today at the press club, he was unashamed about it. Unashamed the fact that he looked people in the eyes and told them one thing that was going to happen, and then knew that he was going to do something else. And you know, here was someone who said we have to improve the discourse of our nation, that we have to put integrity back into politics, that called the previous coalition Prime Minister Scott Morrison a liar, and yet here he has been for nearly 2 years conducting the biggest lie I think that this nation has seen from a Prime Minister ever, and unashamed about it. I think it's a sad day for Australia. I think it's a sad day for the office of the Prime Minister, and I think the Prime Minister isn't going to be able to recover from this. I really don't. And the sad thing is he doesn't seem to get the consequences of what he's done.
I mean, you and I have been around politics a long time, and there's plenty of people on the other side you don't agree with, but you can respect them. Disagree in policy terms, but you respect them for the politician they are and for their character. What does this say about the Prime Minister's character?
Well, I think it says, sadly, a lot about his character, and it says, sadly, that he can't be trusted. And, it makes you start wondering about a lot of things. He said that he wanted Australia Day to remain on the 26th of January, and he supported that before the last election. We now know that what he's been doing is, through his actions, is slowly undermining it. And we now know that really it seems like his whole modus operandi is to say one thing before an election, do things that undermine things, and then he'll say, oh, circumstances have changed, so I've changed my position. Now, that's not a way to govern a nation. That's not real leadership. Real leadership is being prepared to say, these are the difficult issues we need to confront. This is what I'm going to do. This is what real reform looks like. This is how we secure our nation's future, and that's what I'm going to do. Instead, what we seem to have is a socialist left leader who portrayed himself as something else before the last election and is now unashamedly showing his true colours and not even bothering to apologise to the Australian people for having lied to them before the last election.
Yeah, he's going to try and win a war with you over the coalition claims that this is a broken promise and it matters and it speaks to his character. Against his argument, I had to do it because of economic circumstances, even though, as Ross Greenwood said, the ones he cited today, like the pandemic, like the war in Ukraine, all happened before he remade the commitment here on the tax cuts. But he's also going to hope that by buying people off, particularly in the upcoming Dunkley by-election, that he'll win the argument that way and people will look past this. But you don't think they will?
I don't think they will. Let's take the war in Ukraine. Before the last election and even after the election, he said that he would be there to help and support the Ukrainians through thick and thin, right to the bitter end. Well, look what happened with the Taipan helicopters. Over $1 billion of military equipment, which could have been offered to Ukraine, instead has been buried in the ground here in Australia. So do you think the Ukrainian population here in Australia are going to say, oh, this is a man of his word, this is a Prime Minister who says something and then we know he will do everything he can to deliver? No, and we're going to see countless and countless examples of that. His character now is seriously under question, and rightly so. And I think the people of Dunkley aren't mugs. I think that they don't want to be treated like fools like this, because they'll know that the Prime Minister might do this to try and buy their vote ahead of the Dunkley by-election. But then what would he do to try and buy the vote of others that might then put the people of Dunkley under a bus? We've seen it with the way that they cut infrastructure to the electorate of Dunkley.
Well, I just want to get to that, if I can, Dan. I just want to get to that because the ABS yesterday reported we're officially 27 million people. I know you've been speaking out against this massive record spike in migration, saying, you know, it's operating by Labor under no plan whatsoever. We're 30 years ahead of the forecast where they said we'd hit 26. Well, we're 27. Our population's growing faster and faster. And we've got all of these infrastructure challenges. People can't get themselves a home. This is why we're hurting, isn't it?
It is. Immigration is too high. It's running at over 500,000 people a year under Labor. It's putting enormous pressure on housing, on rents, on people's ability to see a doctor. They've cut infrastructure. So in electorates like Dunkley, you know, you're not seeing rail going into that electorate anymore. You're not seeing the road upgrades that are needed. This is a government which said one thing before the last election is doing completely the opposite now. It never said it was going to increase immigration by 500,000 a year, yet that is exactly what it's doing.